Welcome to the Growing Tall Poppies podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Nat Green, and I'm so excited to have you join me as we discuss what it means to navigate your way through post-traumatic growth and not just survive, but to thrive after trauma. Through our podcast, we will explore ways for you to create a life filled with greater purpose, self-awareness, and a deep inner peace. Through integrating the many years of knowledge and professional experience, as well as the wisdom of those who have experienced trauma firsthand, we will combine psychology, accelerated approaches, coaching, and personal experience to assist you to learn, to grow, and to thrive. I hope to empower you to create deeper awareness and understanding and stronger connections with yourself and with others, whilst also paving the way for those who have experienced trauma and adversity to reduce their suffering and become the very best versions of themselves in order to thrive. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode. Welcome. I'm really pleased and grateful today to bring you our next guest on the Growing Tall Poppies podcast. It's my absolute pleasure and privilege to welcome a lady who I met recently through an event for podcasters. And she has a wealth of knowledge and experience and has generously agreed to come and chat with us today and share her wisdom. So let me start by introducing Kathryn to you all. Kathryn Thompson is a Canadian-based entrepreneur who inspires people to use their stories as a way to create change in the world. She's an award-winning marketing and communications expert with more than 20 years of experience. After growing one of her businesses to close to $1 million in sales in less than 4 years, she sold it with a single email. Kathryn is now the founder of Creatively Owned, a marketing and communications firm that helps entrepreneurs use the power of words to create instant appeal for what they are selling. So welcome, Kathryn. It's so great to have you here.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
All right. So we might just start with you giving us, even though I've given a brief introduction, how about you give us an introduction of who you are and what you do in the world?
Yeah, so I think the bio kind of sums it up lovely, but I'll bridge off it a little bit more. I'm a highly intuitive, very emotional empath. And so the people I typically work with are also equally very heart-centered, and I support them in sharing their story to create and put out the meaningful work and the work that they want to do in the world, but more specifically in a really aligned, authentic way. So some of the values that I carry are integrity, authenticity, creative expression. And so I really help people stay true to who they are when it comes to marketing and sales, because I know a lot of people that come into my world struggle with that. They feel like they're losing themselves in it because they don't necessarily agree with a lot of the tactics and whatnot that have been taught. And so I really help them honor who they are so that they can bring their most meaningful work out into the world and share it with people and really get it into the hands of more people. That's me in a nutshell. Career-wise, I'm very multi-passionate. I'm a creative myself, photography, videography, pottery, you name it. I'm very creative at heart. So
Oh, I love that so much. And I I can see why we connected immediately because I share the majority of those values, particularly authenticity and integrity. So I love that. And especially in the world of marketing, we see so many things and so many people who are out there and they just seem so misaligned, or I
yeah.
feel misaligned to them. So I love that you help people tell their stories and share their story in a beautiful way.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if I can ask then a little bit. You got to the point where you help people share their stories. So today I'm wondering if you'd be willing to share a bit of your story about how you got to be able to do that in the world.
Yeah, amazing question. So, when I went to university, I really had no idea what I wanted to do. Originally, I was going to go in and be a forensic anthropologist. Like that was my thing. I know. And then I ended up talking to a counselor who talked me out of it. I've always really loved trying to understand people, places, things, culture, right? So it's not that far off. And my dad's an accountant. And so I was like, okay, I'll just go into business school. It's a safe thing. I was playing competitive soccer. So I was going to university really to play soccer and fulfill that dream. But I knew I had to do something. And I wanted a degree that would at least set me on the pathway to have a career after it, right? So not just
Mm,
maybe your basic arts degree, nothing wrong with that, but I just knew if I'm going to go to school for 4 or 5 years, I want to be able to get out and get a job. So initially I was
mhm.
going to go into accounting. And the beautiful thing about commerce or business school where I live is that you get to try all the classes before you actually pick a major. But
Oh,
accounting was
wow.
the thing. Yeah. And
Mm,
accounting was the thing that my dad did. So I thought, oh, I'll probably do that. And then I could work in the family business, yeah, to all the things. My first accounting class, I was like, this is boring. Ain't doing this. And I went into my first marketing class and I loved it because it was so creative. And so I got my undergraduate in marketing, spent the first 6 or 7 years of my career doing marketing, but feeling duped because I was working for other people and they had in corporations that they had a very particular marketing
mm,
directive. So there wasn't really anything creative about it or that creative about it. So I ended up going to getting a master's in communication because I was trying to escape the discomfort that I was feeling in my career of not really jiving with it. And I ended up going to the Philippines as part of my master's research, lived in a
mm.
remote village, did a visual ethnography, really experienced their way of being, and then came home and started to tell stories about it. And that trip really changed the trajectory for me because it really changed my life course, my beliefs, really helped me get back to my values of
Mm.
authentic connection, integrity, authenticity, all of the things. And from there, I ended up ditching my corporate career after 15 years and diving
Wow.
headfirst into opening my brick and mortar business to sell and produce wine.
Oh,
And I
I
know.
love it. So,
So
such a
such a
big change.
wild, yeah. And when I reflect back now to what drew me to that business was again the direct experience, being able to deal with a variety of different people. And I also love food, wine, travel, all the things. And so I just ended up naturally being able to talk about it and sell it. The business model and the partnership weren't aligned. And so we ended up selling after 4 years. And I came back to my roots of marketing and sales, but knowing I wanted to do things very differently, especially having gone into the online space where I felt like I was being hit with this what is going on here? Because all of the things that weren't in integrity to me were like amplified on steroids. All of the
Mm.
sales tactics that were manipulative. And I was like, what is going on? So my goal was to rewrite that narrative. And that's what I've been doing for the last 6 years in Creatively Owned was I'm going to help all those business owners that want to do really good work in the world, who value integrity and authenticity. And I'm going to help them because I have the decades of experience now in marketing and sales, and I can help them in doing that. That brings me to present day in a nutshell.
Ah, what an interesting story, like so many different things. And we see that so often, don't we? That, oh, we think we'll follow in the footsteps of our parents, or we'll do this because there's this expectation that maybe we should. So, isn't it wonderful that you tried it and
Yeah.
then made your own decision anyway?
Yeah.
But that you also took that risk and backed yourself and went and explored things your way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, as we know, a lot of guests that I have come on the show and they've experienced trauma or adversity in their life. And we talk about how they've navigated that experience. And I firmly believe that if you're human, you've been through some sort of adversity. I don't think I know anyone who hasn't. So I'm wondering if you would be comfortable sharing some of that story as well, so our listeners can understand some of the things you've been through and how you've overcome them.
Yeah. I think the corporate world and environment was traumatic in and of itself for me because I was having to fit myself into the values of a company that I often never resonated with. So, for example, at two different stages of my career, I ended up actually working for a CEO that had or leaders of a company, directors of a company that I was a direct report to that had narcissistic tendencies.
Ooh.
And so, yeah, so one particular incident, which is why I ended up quitting this one position and ended up going after my master's and all the thing, was they were trying to fire my boss and they were going around it in a backhanded sort of way. And they were trying to pin on me that I had been harassed by my boss, and to a point that HR in the city I lived in contacted me for a private meeting to say that my boss was harassing me, which never was. So I was being pinned with this thing.
Mm.
And it ended up being such a toxic experience for me because for me, integrity is important. And so when somebody is telling something about me that isn't true,
Mm.
that can such wreak havoc on my system. That took years for me to recover from, which is interesting because I then moved on to another job where the CEO was the same way, very narcissistic tendencies, where they say things to you that's like a gut punch, and you're like,
Mm.
ooh, that didn't feel good. Why doesn't that feel good? And then you're like, ooh, there's some manipulation happening. For example, this particular CEO said to me after I left the company,
Mm.
really smart people make dumb decisions, basically implying that me quitting was a
Mm.
dumb decision. Like it was these
Yeah.
undercutting, we often called it was like this undercutting statements that almost hit you after the fact. They hit gut punched you, and then you'd go away and you'd be like, oof. So I had a tendency, I think it's me being an empath, I had a tendency to attract and navigate narcissistic behaviors. That was corporate reality. So that the trauma around that, and then having to navigate that through corporate, and then our business partnership in my brick and mortar wasn't the greatest partnership. And that created a lot of trauma for me and probably everybody
Mm.
involved because it was family. So I was
Yeah.
in partnership with my husband, my brother, my sister-in-law, and we were at odds for 4 years. That
Mm.
the sad part about it was is that it fractured the relationship, which is now taken a turn and the relationship is mending, but it's taken a lot of years for that mending to happen.
There's often so much fallout, isn't there? And
Yeah.
I know that we often get warned, don't go into business with friends or family, but there's so many layers to that because it can turn out so differently.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your journey. And it's interesting that that corporate space really is very different,
Yeah.
particularly difficult with the narcissists when we're empaths, when we feel so deeply, because that gaslighting is rife, isn't it? You leave there thinking, what did I do? Oh my goodness,
Yeah.
it's me. And you really take it on board as something is wrong with me, with us. Yes.
Yeah. And it's because we care so deeply, it becomes that for me, it was a spiral, right? I would just
Mm,
spiral down because I'd be like, what's wrong with me? What
mm,
did I say that was wrong? And then you start to try to like mold yourself so that you don't get these undercutting, backhanded, gaslighting situations. You're just like, and that just makes it even worse because you move so far away from your center and your core and your
yes.
values. You're just trying to avoid. And that was what I was trying to do was avoid those situations. But even in the avoidance, I was being pinned for something that I was like, where is this even coming from? I've never once said
Mm,
my boss was harassing me. It
yeah.
was
So
so crazy. Yeah,
it was that underlying agenda that they had, and you
totally.
were the fallout of that. So, how did you initially cope with that? Like, your nervous system would have been screaming at you, this is not okay. But you were stuck in this situation. We just had to keep going.
Yeah, my coping mechanism that I identified after the brick and mortar, after we sold the brick and mortar, and I really healed from that, which was probably 2 years where I felt like I was in a neutral state when it came to thinking about the partnership, the relationship, the conversations. I was very neutral about it. It took me about 2 years.
Mm,
My natural tendency, though, was escapism. And so I quit the job. I left the situation. I And then I just kept recreating it in my
Mm,
existence, never actually dealing with the all of the things that were going on as not that being in a narcissistic relationship is not your fault, but to be able to identify and navigate it and not be a sponge to it, which is what I was. I just escaped. I'd quit, I'd run away, I'd walk away. And that ties back to an experience I had in my early childhood where I essentially had to run for my life. Call it a potential kidnapping situation, whatever we want to call it. Yeah, I was 4 years old and I was walking to a friend's house, and
mm,
these four women were walking down the street towards me. And I had never seen them before on this block. And I grew up in a small city, quite
mhm,
small. And I'd never seen them before on my block. And my gut instinct was like, cross the street. I don't
mm.
know why my gut said it, but it did. And as soon as I crossed the street, they said, get her. And I ran to the Archbishop's house on our street, who is never home and never answered the door, like ringing the doorbell. I ended up hiding behind these two big cedar trees and
Ah,
then jumping a veranda to our other friend's house and finally getting someone to help me. So I think I've been running for my life my whole life. Yeah.
that, thank you for sharing that. That it would have been like horrendous at any age, but as a little
Yes.
4-year-old girl,
Yeah.
so much fear, and yet you were brave enough to know, to trust your gut
Yeah.
that this doesn't feel right. So you were
Yeah.
really in tune with that even back then.
Yeah.
And you still were able to get yourself out of that situation and know to ask for
Yeah.
help. I think there'd be very few 4-year-olds, to be honest, that would be able to navigate that in that way. That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Which then I think translated and played out to, like I said, things in my life and how I handled adversity was like, I quit, I'm done. And I would just avoid and move on rather than actually dealing with it until it came to a head in my brick and mortar where I was forced to deal with it.
Yes, so it's funny how we play out those patterns throughout
Yeah.
our life. And so often in the work that I do with clients to do our breakthrough session, we get to the root cause. So back then, that significant trauma experience led to that pattern of I'll escape, I get out of it. Whenever I feel unsafe, I get out. So that's exactly what you've done.
Yeah.
Just wondering, Kathryn, though, if at that little 4-year-old girl had that really deep intuition and trusted her gut. When you were in those corporate environments, were you getting that gut response and not able to listen, or were you listening?
I was getting the gut responses. I wasn't listening. So my natural tendency was I would get it instinctively. I'd be like, ooh, that's not right. Or, ooh, I could feel it in my gut. It was like a gut punch. But
Mm,
then I would justify, oh, you're overreacting. And I think that came with the gaslighting or I didn't mean that, or you're taking these too personally, or you're too sensitive, or you care too much, or
mm,
whatever that was said. And so then I would play it in my head, oh, I'm overreacting. They didn't mean it. And I was highly forgiving in those moments, and I would give people 15 chances when
mm.
I probably should have only given them two.
Yeah, and that's the nature of who you are as a person. That's that tendency to trust, to see the best in people, and have that integrity. It's interesting, though, that we often see, and I know we chatted the other day about that head, heart, and gut, the three brains. So that gut brain was switched on and really getting that response. But after we go through trauma and adversity over and over again, going through being let down with the narcissist stuff, everything going on, your capacity to listen and
Yeah.
have the head and the heart and the gut continuing to be integrated, lessened. Yeah. So you
Yeah.
could cognitively go in your head and your head brain was working and your heart brain was questioning that, but somehow you'd managed to shut off that gut brain because of it being quashed based on the experiences. Yeah.
Totally. And then the ruminating, like I would ruminate
Mm.
for almost to a point, especially when I had the brick and mortar, like I'd give myself a headache from ruminating so much, playing scenarios over and over in my head, trying to convince myself that what I was experiencing wasn't true. Even
Mm,
though I felt it deeply, I was like,
yeah.
ooh, I could sense things. And my husband always says this, you have this like sixth sense. You just know, it's almost like you can predict things before they happen. And people often go, that's not true, or it didn't happen that way, or I don't see it that way. And then I go, oh, maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. So you question yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then you finally, your back was to the wall in your bricks and mortar business with that extra dynamic of tricky family relationships. What was it that got you to the point of, I need to listen, we need to be done? How did you get to that point?
Yeah, it's wild because it is wild. So COVID hit, as everybody knows, COVID hit in 2020, and it was April of 2020 that our store was shut to the public and everybody else's store in our location was shut to the public. And there was some disagreement at that time, and it was middle of May, and I was pretty much carrying the brunt of the work along with a lot of support from my husband, but I was doing most of it. And it was internal gut instinct. I'm like, I am sending an email to my list on June 1. I didn't even tell my husband, I didn't tell my other business partners. I just did it. And everyone was like, you're nuts because it's COVID. We're closed to the public. No one's buying a brick and mortar business because nobody knew at that point where things were going. And I just said, I don't care. I'm done.
Mm,
And that's also a trait of mine of like when the light switch goes off, and I often say this, when the light switch goes off and I'm done, there's no getting me back at that point. Like I've made the decision, and when I make the decision, it's go time. Sent the email, had 11 interested buyers,
wow,
two
11?
signed NDAs, yeah, and sold that business within 2.5 months. Like we transferred ownership by the middle of August of 2020, and I was finally out of the store by middle of September of 2020. And people were like, how did you do this? And it
It's
was like,
amazing.
my internal instinct was like, send the email.
So again, somehow in amongst all of that chaos within
Yeah.
you, you were able to trust your gut and you did it anyway.
Yeah.
So you reconnected with yourself
Yeah.
and knew that the pain of staying where you were wasn't worth it for you.
No. No.
Yeah. Wow, that's an amazing story. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
That decision was a wild one because it was like nobody's selling brick and mortar. It's 2020. So much is unpredictable right now.
Mm.
And the beauty of our industry that we were in was wine. Wine sales went through the roof when restaurants and everything closed because people weren't buying, they weren't going out and eating. They had a lot more
Mm.
disposable income. So all of a sudden our sales went through the roof. And that's what really helped. It was just such a, yeah, divine timing.
Perfect. And we're all staying home to drink our wine.
Yeah. Basically.
There wasn't
Yeah.
much else to do when you're stuck at home and the world had shut down, was there?
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. So as you look back then, you then said you had a good 2 years before things felt that they neutralized. In
Yeah.
that 2 years, what sort of things did you feel you were able to do to move forward?
Yeah, so I did a lot of internal self-reflection. I definitely got into like victim mindset in the brick and mortar, lots of blaming, lots of projecting outwards, lots of anger, lots of resentment. And so I knew for me to repair any relationship I had, and also for me to stay healthy, I needed to go inward and I needed to heal the resentment. I needed to have the forgiveness. I needed to acknowledge where I was in reaction to behaviors that I didn't like, and
Mm,
that was okay because I had reached a breaking point. So when oftentimes, and I was being punished for my reactions because my reactions
mm,
weren't always the greatest because I was frustrated, angry, burnt
mm.
out, you name it. But I had to do a lot of inner work. And then, of course, I worked with various practitioners to help me navigate this. So I didn't do it alone. I had a ton of support over the years and still do a lot of personal development work. So it's not like after 2 years, it was like, okay, it's neutral and we're good. It was like, this is an ongoing evolution for me
Mm.
so that I don't get back to a place and repeat these patterns that I've experienced for a vast majority of my life. Yeah.
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 And really having that insight, not everyone has that insight. So being able to tune in again and recognize, yeah, there's things that I'll own,
Yeah.
but also knowing why they were there and where they had come from, and
Yeah.
being able to connect with some people who could help you do that. Because you certainly, it's not something you can work through alone, is it?
No, no. And yeah, it just isn't. And I think that's a message to send far and wide is
Mm.
you need that witnessing, especially and this going through trauma and then trying to heal trauma has to be done in relation, I think, with a
Yes.
therapist, with an energy healer, with whatever.
Yeah,
But
whatever works for you. No,
whatever
it's
modality works for you. Yeah.
exactly. It's definitely not a one size fits all. And some people, you'll go to a therapist, they're not my thing. I want to
Yeah.
go down this way. And as an empath and having that level of intuition, it probably wasn't your stock standard path to heal
Yeah.
your nervous system.
Yeah, very somatic. A lot of, I think that was probably the greatest transformation for me was the, like actually coming back into my body
Yeah.
and somatically healing my body because intellectually I understood it.
Mm,
My brain's really smart and intellectual. I understand I can talk myself out of things and into things and you name
yeah.
it, but it was all stored in my body and I could feel it. I had chronic
Mm,
pain. I was disconnected from my body. There would be moments of, am I actually even, I couldn't, I didn't even know what it felt like anymore in a lot of ways. Like,
mm.
yeah. So lots of somatic work.
Yeah, so you've done what most high achieving professionals that I know, and they're the ones that I tend to work with, really, in order to keep ourselves safe, shut down that feeling part
Yeah.
because we have to compartmentalize things to be able to keep going a lot of the time. So that work is so essential for us, isn't it? To tune into our body and feel things again, even though it's painful. It's very
Yeah.
painful, and you've got to work through it, though, don't you, to move through?
Yeah. And I wouldn't have been able to go to the depth without somebody witnessing me and holding space for me in a safe place because my brain would often talk me out of it. This is silly. This is stupid. This doesn't work. Like
Yeah.
all the things yeah. And then when I'd be working with somatic therapists, they could sense there's more. Let's get to
Mm.
the depth of that anger. There's more. Like you're not sharing all of it. And that's, was a pattern, right? It was like, I'll just suppress it and push it all down and I'm good. I'm fine.
And isn't it interesting when you say that? I could see you squirming in your seat, and I was feeling that internally
Yeah.
too, because we're called out
Yeah,
and
totally.
met where we need to be because we feel things. We know that, yeah,
Yeah.
they've got me. They can't hide
Yeah.
that anymore. So it's uncomfortable, but it's so important and really brave to be able to do that work, because it's the only way we're going to move forward after some sort of trauma or really challenging situation, isn't it? We have to own it.
Yeah, totally. Totally.
Do you think there's any specific qualities or personal attributes that you see as being key for moving through trauma and into post traumatic growth where you are now?
That's a great question. I think for me, what was really key was openness, to just be open and
Mm,
allow myself to be open and vulnerable in those experiences with my coaches, my mentors, my healers, my practitioners. Is for me, it was openness because I was someone who really wanted to suppress the emotion and not really show it.
yeah.
And so I needed to be open and vulnerable, which was
Mm,
key for my transformation. But I want to say that it's probably unique to everybody and their experience and what they actually need in the moment, like what their patterns are and stuff like that. I think it's possible for anybody if you're willing to do the work and you're willing to go to those places that you're trying to hide or don't want to go to or whatnot. So I would say openness and vulnerability to the process.
yeah, I love that so much. And It's funny because in the last couple of episodes, they're the things that have come up, that vulnerability, because often as professionals, we feel like we have to be able to do everything and not show that part of ourselves because people hold us up on this almost like a pedestal. It's ridiculous that
Yeah.
we need to be perfect in so many ways. But the reality is, we're all human. And
Yeah.
until we're willing to be vulnerable and be real and authentic and have integrity, things won't change, will they?
No, exactly. Yeah.
So, what would you say is one of the most important lessons or learnings as a result of what you've been through?
Yeah, I think that for me is actually trusting my gut and not ruminating or second guessing that first instinct
Mm,
that comes through. But I think the most important thing for me is that I was very reactive. So I would get that gut instinct. I wouldn't like the situation. So I'd be very like judgmental or reactive towards the person, the environment, whatever. And I'd get angry and resentful. Now I know to ask myself, what is this telling me about what I value and what matters to me, rather than just reacting to the person, because that reaction never brings anything great, right? It just
no,
breeds more conflict. And so pausing, getting curious about what this tells me about what I value, and then continuing to honor that value, because it's, to me, it's in that resistance. It's not something I need to overcome. It's just connecting me back to what is in integrity to me, but
yes,
also knowing that what's integrity to me might not be the same value or integrity to somebody else. Now, it doesn't make it right or wrong, unless, of course, it is psychological or emotional abuse, right? There is a
oh,
right
for
and wrong
sure.
element there.
Yeah,
But if I'm being triggered, for example, because somebody's doing something that's not in the same value as me or the integrity as me, rather than reacting and being judgmental, just understanding what I value and then getting curious about maybe what they value. And if there's a misalignment in beliefs and values, that's fine. I don't have to judge them for that. They get to be who they need to be and just have that acceptance. And I think that's probably the biggest lesson for me, is just accepting people for who they are without trying to change them because they don't match my values and my integrity.
because that was what had been happening to you in those other
Yeah.
situations, that you were being molded
Yes.
because your values didn't align with theirs, but they
Yeah.
hadn't done that work and weren't as astute and developed as you. Yeah, really interesting how it goes full circle, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what else really stands out then as being something that helped as pivotal to move you forward?
Yeah. I think the thing for me, I think I had to come to that breaking point. I had to come to that, like, it had to come to a head where it was like, call it your rock bottom, call it your
Mhm.
most emotional low, whatever it might be. And for me, again, I think it was somatic. And I resisted somatic work for a long time. I would do like the talk therapy or the mental stuff. That was comfortable and safe. But
I
for
hear
me,
you.
yeah,
Oh, yes.
EFT tapping was probably one of the most profound things that I did, but EFT tapping with somebody there to witness me. Because if I was just to do EFT tapping on my own, I would not do it as deep as I needed to go. My practitioner was like, she called me out often in a very loving, compassionate way that allowed me to really get the anger and the resentment out. So that was, yeah, huge.
Yeah, and it's an interesting modality, isn't it? The EFT tapping. And there's now so much more research. It's one of those things that I want it to be able to work for me, but again,
Yeah.
I've tried it and it's like I get nothing. It's, yeah, maybe I'm resisting that and I need to go deeper. Or
And
maybe it's not
maybe
my thing. And like you
totally.
said, you've got to find your thing. For me, I'm loving the TRE, which is the
Yeah.
trauma and tension release exercises, which I know I talked to you about the other day. It's really around getting whatever's stuck in our nervous system
Yeah.
from years of hearing people's stories, carrying our own stories, carrying other people's stories, and working out a way that we can let that become unstuck in our nervous system through EFT tapping for you, for TRE for me. Doesn't matter what it is, does it?
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. That process sounds so cool. I know we've talked about it and I'd be interested in, yeah, trying it because I think,
mm,
yeah, EFT is great. And I think, yeah, that release in the nervous system's huge.
it absolutely is. And I think the more we know about trauma and see the benefits of these alternative ways
Yeah,
of doing things, the more information we get and the more research that's done, the more we realize that just plain old talk therapy isn't enough.
totally.
It
Yeah.
works and it's helpful in so many ways. But as you said before, we intellectualize stuff, but we need to feel it as well
Yeah.
to reconnect the parts of ourselves that maybe haven't felt safe enough to be connected.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. So you made that decision, you sold the business, it worked in your favor, it was wonderful. You had a couple of years where you really dug deep and did the work. What next? Tell me about how that post-traumatic growth curve really went for you then.
Yeah. So for me, I was a lot more calmer in this business. And because I deal a lot with personalization and one-to-one work a lot with people, that I learned not to take on like their stuff with their
Mm.
frustrations, which I'd often internalize and then try to fix. So I stopped becoming this fixer and I wasn't carrying the burden like I need to carry you up the mountain, I need to fix you, which then has allowed me to really expand the business. Because when I first launched, when I left the brick and mortar, I was terrified. I was
Mm.
terrified to have more than 5 people in a group program with me because I didn't want all the energy. I didn't want all the problems. And it was all like
Yes.
my nervous system could handle
Mm.
until I did the work. And now I'm more receptive to receiving, but I also have really clear boundaries of what's my responsibility and what isn't my responsibility, which then allows me to have that much more flow into my business. Yeah.
So, how do you do that? How do you? Because I know a lot of our listeners are health professionals, helping professionals who do have people telling their story. How do we not carry that burden of that person's story and keep that separate? I'd love to hear
Yeah.
your secret for that.
Yeah. So me was the EFT tapping. Real it was that was a big one. And meditation is another one that allows me to ground. Like I have a daily practice that I do. And then I also have set up my business in a way that allows me to integrate those daily practices into my client sessions. So I'm not going into back to back to back sessions so that I
Good.
can clear the energy around me so that I'm not carrying that on. But it's like almost like an energetic boundary that
Hmm.
I was able to create by getting really clear about what my responsibility was and what it isn't,
Mm.
because I wasn't clear before.
Yeah.
And so that's part of why I took on the burden of the stuff was because I was acting as the martyr or the fixer. I'll fix that and I'll fix that and I'll fix that. And then all of a sudden you're wrapped up in their world. Now I am very clear on what's mine, what isn't. And if I feel like I am taking something on, then I do the work, the cord cutting, the meditation, those sorts of things, those
Yes.
practices, getting out in nature, really grounding for me. And lots of baths. Being in water is a big one for me. But again, I think it's finding your method, your way that really works for you. Yeah.
Yeah. So, really knowing how you best ground yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, whatever it is. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
for me, I know it's having a coffee by the beach. I just
Yeah.
sit there and I
Amazing.
enjoy the peace and quiet of that. I don't need anyone else there. I'm just sit and have my coffee. For you, the bath, but just getting out in nature is also really grounding, isn't it?
Yeah. And being aware where you are taking the responsibility on. So, like the thoughts that are going through your head. So,
Mm,
if you're assuming something about a client or you're like, however it might be, oh, they might be pissed off because I said this or whatever it might be, where you get in, where your brain starts to create drama. It's
mm,
also starting to, like, I started a trigger journal where things
Mhm.
started to anything that triggered me, and then I'd go, what is this teaching me about what I value? Where was a boundary crossed? Blah, blah, blah. That has been absolutely wild for me because it's just
Mm.
unpacked so many triggers. Yeah.
I love that. I'm going to write that one down. So trigger journal. And one way it just came to me then, we have gratitude jars. We could have a trigger jar, or I remember doing this a long time ago with a client where things that they took on board that were negative about themselves or their environment, they would put it in this shoebox, I think it was, but then
Yeah.
put all your triggers in there and then
Yeah.
have a burning ceremony or something like
Totally.
that to burn it
Yeah.
and get rid of it. So there's so many ways. I love that. So a trigger
Yeah.
journal or trigger jar or trigger box or something like that
Yeah.
would be
Yeah.
powerful. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's a great tip and strategy. Any other
Yeah.
little wise?
Yeah. The trigger, like the documenting my triggers and getting to the root of it has probably been the best meditation nature. Yeah, I'm trying to think of any. I also love to cook. So anything that allows me to get into my creative flow
Yes.
will take me out of my mental brain. But I have such a calmer mind now with that combination and understanding of why I was triggered or that sort of thing has been really helpful because I've always looked at triggering as a bad thing.
Mm,
Why am I triggering? Because I'm judging. But now I've reframed it to it's actually just showing me what I value. For example, I often get triggered by like big money claims, right? Like
yeah.
how to make 14K in 2 days. That
Yeah,
those
one of those.
trigger me. Yeah, they trigger me. And I would have people say it's because you're afraid of money or you don't like money or you have a negative charge around money. And I was like, it's actually not that. I'm looking at the transparency of that. I'm going, there's more to that story. And as a depth worker, as somebody who likes to go to the truth of things, I'm going,
Yes.
is that profit?
Yeah.
Is that right? My brain started, so it's more
Mm.
around what I value and I align with. It has nothing to do with the money piece, and it's not an obstacle I need to overcome. I just know where I need to go as a result of that. And I think that's really helped with the reframing because I was always trying to fix myself because of these triggers, and there was nothing for me to actually fix.
No. So recognizing that a trigger is, it's again, it's just a word. It's not negative or positive. It's a trigger is a sign that
Yep.
something is out of alignment, whether
Yeah.
that's what they've said, what they've done. It's about then being able to navigate that path and put it where it needs to be for you, positive or
Yeah.
negative.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I really love that. That's excellent. And
Yeah.
I think that doing something that's creative is really that's moving it from one half of the brain to the other half of the brain, the analytical part through to creative, and it helps you move through that and help reduce that charge. Exactly. And get
Totally.
out of your head and into your heart space.
Yeah. And usually with things with my hands, right? Pottery,
Yes.
photography, cooking, right? It's now I'm using this other side of my brain that isn't over analyzing and all the things.
Yeah. And it's that doing
Yeah.
and being. So
Yeah.
doing both and just being in it and sitting with it as well, which you can do more of when you're in that creative space
Yeah.
rather than push, push, which is so common, isn't it? As high achievers, where we just keep pushing through, because
Yeah.
that's the way society's set things up a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we need to do more being and sitting
Yeah.
and just allowing time and space.
100%.
Yeah. What I'd love you to do now is a little bit more around what you do now and
Yeah.
tell us more about you and where we can find you.
Yeah, so you can find me at Creatively Owned. My website's Creatively Owned, Instagram, Facebook, Creatively Owned, and I hang out most on Instagram. And basically, what I do now is predominantly support those selling the invisible, like selling a service, an offering that isn't tangible and doesn't often fit into traditional marketing, right? That tells us
Mm,
we need one big tangible result. We need to take people from A to B. But in the healing world, our healing is often nonlinear. So it doesn't actually fit into this roadmap that's if you just do this step. you'll heal all of your trauma. If it was that easy, we'd all be doing it.
We'd all be fixed.
Yeah, basically. And it's more of a spiral and it's more of a trial and error. It's more of a non-linear experience. And so I really support people in articulating the value of what they do and how to really package and position that in a way that's in integrity with what they're actually offering. Because again, a lot of traditional marketing is give a guarantee, tell them they'll get here by
Mm,
this date and this time. And lots of healers as we're like, I can't promise that. And everybody's experience is unique and everybody's there might be similarities in trauma. It's everybody's unique in how they're wired and operate. And even just you and I have very different experiences with
mm.
our the modalities that we use, and that's okay. And so I help them put into words what they do, how they do it, so they can really get their meaningful work and their healing work out into the world, into the hands of more people.
Oh, I think this is amazing. And I'm thinking, oh, I can already think of so many people that will benefit from
Yeah.
the approach you use, knowing that it's okay for us to be ourselves and show up exactly as we are rather than feel we need to fit in this box because it's so not a one size fits all. Whereas often that need to market and communicate our worth and our value is that hustle culture that doesn't feel right to us
Yeah.
as healers and helpers.
Yeah. Totally.
Oh, I love that. So I'll put all that in the show notes. And I know that you've also got a quiz. So you want to tell us
Yeah.
about that? Because I'm definitely going to take that quiz. I'm really keen to find out more
Yeah.
about that.
I love my quiz. It's the What's Your Elevated Edge quiz. And basically, when you take it, it gives you this very in-depth. If you haven't already felt this about me, I call myself a depth worker. The people that
Hmm.
come into my world are depth workers, right? They like to go to the depths of things. They understand people are nuanced. So through this quiz, when you take it, then you get this really in-depth report. I'm talking in really in depth about your natural gifts, what makes you different, like maybe even the marketing platforms or channels to be on, right? So again, it's not about the cookie cutter, it's about how to really honor your authentic expression, what's your unique edge in this world, and how to put that out into the world and share it with the world and get paid for it without the compromise, without having to fit
Mm.
yourself into a box. And so it's a really fun quiz. My intention was you could walk away with it and have almost, I don't want to call it a blueprint, but anyone that's taken it has said, I finally feel seen. I feel like you wrote this specifically for me, which is my whole intention. I wanted people to feel seen and understood and be able to just go, okay, I can be me and I can express myself authentically. And that actually, my uniqueness or my weirdness or my quirks or whatever are part of my superpower. And that's okay. Yeah.
Oh, what a gift. I think you are a gift to this world. I just think the stories you've shared today, I
Thank
honestly
you.
feel so honored to have shared this space with you. I've one question that I ask at the end usually, and given the very beautiful, powerful story you told about 4-year-old you, what do you think your younger self would think of what you've achieved?
I think my younger self would be so impressed. And I'd also think my younger self would say, maybe there are areas that you're being a little modest, that you could push yourself just that much more to really step into that highest potential. That up until this point, all your lived experiences have maybe had you playing a little bit modest, and now it's time to fully shine.
I love that. So it's time for you to be a tall poppy, to grow
Yeah.
even taller. I love
Yeah.
that. Yes, look out, world. I'm really
Yeah.
excited. I'm going to do that quiz today. Absolutely going to go off there. I want to find that the
Yeah.
secrets and feel seen and see where's it going to take me. And I'm really grateful that you've offered that. So I'll put that in the show notes as well. Thank
Awesome.
you so much for being you, Kathryn, and for showing up and being the most amazing, authentic version of you, sharing that with our guests. Been really wonderful having you on. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure connecting and chatting and sharing my story. And I'm just so honored to be in this space with you as well.
And I look forward to our chat on your podcast soon.
Yes, I
And
know. I'm excited to have you on.
yes, so am I. And I look forward to sharing that with everyone as well. So thank you so much, Kathryn. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me in this episode of Growing Tall Poppies. It is my deepest hope that today's episode may have inspired and empowered you to step fully into your post-traumatic growth so that you can have absolute clarity around who you are, what matters the most to you, and to assist you to release your negative emotions and regulate your nervous system so you can fully thrive. New episodes are published every Tuesday, and I hope you'll continue to join us as we explore both the strategies and the personal qualities required to fully live a life of post-traumatic growth and to thrive. So if it feels aligned to you and really resonates, then I invite you to hit subscribe, and it would mean the world to us if you could share this episode with others who you feel may benefit too. You may also find me on Instagram at Growing Tall Poppies and Facebook, Dr. Natalie Green. Remember, every moment is an opportunity to look for the lessons and to learn and increase your ability to live the life you desire and deserve. So for now, stay connected, stay inspired, stand tall like the tall poppy you are, and keep shining your light brightly in the world. Bye for now.